Sort of Coming Chapter 853. As soon as the old master left, Cui Dongshan immediately picked up a white jade axis on the table, sighed, and wiped it carefully with the white sleeves. One of the joys of life is not to say a false alarm, but also unexpected joy. Don't feel obsessive and kind. Just staying at the gate of the mountain, sitting there drinking tea and sipping melon seeds, is a good talking master. There are a few great monks in the world and 14th realms that no one wants to provoke. It's just that Bai is also a scholar. The old blind man has always been too lazy to pay attention to foreign affairs in the mountain. You can scold as you scold. Don't be heard by the old blind man in person. Up. And the monk who is nicknamed Chicken Soup Monk is so clear that he is a Buddhist dragon elephant with compassion is the heart of the Buddha. Only this stinky nose of the Taoist temple in the East China Sea is the most unrecognizable. Old Guanzhou never said a word to Sui right from beginning to end. Sui right originally wanted to take this opportunity to ask more about his husband, but it was difficult to speak when things came to the fore. In fact, Jiang Shangjin told her some inside stories about the blessed land of the cloud caves, about the wormwood supporter Ni Yuan Pin, what Jiang Hui caught mosquitoes, why he disappeared back then, why he was thrown out of the blessed lotus root blessed land by the old master, and spent a long time in a foreign land. There was a three-legged golden toad on his shoulder. What did Ni Yuan Pin seek, the relationship with Jinding Temple, etc. Jiang Shangjin had no place to hide. The reason why Jiang Shangjin is so easy to talk about on the right side of Sui is simple. Both parties eat at the poor mountain. The family does not talk about two things, but it is purely the real-world genealogy Jianqiu, and the elder Yugui. The relationship with the suzerain, Jiang Shangzhen's reputation has always been stable. Zhu Lian did not sprinkle salt on her wounds, saying that the painstaking effort is worthy of life, and the poor foolish person is always ruthlessly annoyed. Some long-awaited reunion, the more unharmed, the more anxious things are. Sui's expression on the right side was sad, and he did not leave the Luopa mountain without Yujin and return to the place where the cultivating path was formed. Instead, he climbed up the steps, seemingly going to the top of the mountain to enjoy the scenery. Zhu Lian picked up the other shaft head, which looked like white jade material, crystal-clear jade, but it was not. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be of horns. The two shaft heads for hanging pictures on the mounting wall are learned. If they are high and low double shafts, they are collectively called the heaven and earth style. If it is a hand scroll spread out from side to side, it is the sun and moon style. Lao Guanzi's Taoist painting is quite special. It only talks about the shaft head. Of course, it belongs to the sun and the moon, because the shape of the 5 sacred mountains is built with heaven and earth. Therefore, there are pictures of the world, the sun and the moon are surging, and the stars are listed. Cui Dongshan held one of the shaft heads and smiled. Whether this thing is buried in the homestead or pasted on the door, it is used to settle the townhouse, or it is sealed by a talisman. Wearing the scroll on the body, a gas trainer travels through mountains and waters. It's almost like being both the Lord of the 5 mountains and the God of blasphemy. It has both natural and supernatural powers, and possesses many incredible wonders. Compared with Wu Shuangjiang's couplets that can't be moved, the Taoist paintings of the old masters are more flexible. Some Tao Shu, scroll, the two combined into one, it becomes a fairy soldier. Zhu Lian asked casually, once the refining is successful, the shaft of the Taoist book is closed, and the monks of the earth fairy can also swim long distances and climb into the water with this thing. The scroll material should be light and not damage the painting, so the scroll heads of the people's homes are mostly wood. Scholars and wealthy families mostly use gold and jade. The fairy mansion on the mountain, the discerning eye, the 1,000-year-old Ganoderma lucidum, and the porcelain scrolls of blue and white or fighting color, generally come. It is said that the horn shaft is easy to be eaten by insects, and there is a lot of moisture when unrolled, but this pair of horn shaft heads is most likely the relic of a fellow monk in the ancient times. It is an extremely rare thing that can be encountered and cannot be found. The key is the scroll in Zhu Lian's hand, which is inscribed with the two characters water urn, in ink seal, prosecuting the three realms, sealing the mountains, examining the merits, and appreciating the sins and blessings. In addition, there are more than 100 immortal names written in tiny lower letters. The branch in Cui Dongshan's hand is the two characters mountain talisman, in the Dan Shu, and the clouds are transpiring, heaven and man give urns, there will never be floods, call gods and ghosts, and save lives. The image of the mountain by Yuzuan is additionally painted, like a picture of the true worship of the gods. Cui Dongshan shook his head. That's not good, you must be a monk in the upper 5 realms, otherwise you may not be able to handle it, let alone take it for a long distance. The control of an immortal soldier's treasure has always been a difficult problem for all major sections. Cui Dongshan grinned and said, if it is the destiny of the old master, then we will really send it to Luopashan. Attacks are often just a fancy, more used to deter. In general, there is no use. But if it can transport the natural energy of a place of mountain, water and air, while continuously gathering the spiritual energy of the heavens and the earth, it is the numerology pattern of the heavier the earth and the better. Cui Dongshan sighed, it's a pity, it's a thing from the previous dynasty after all, and it has been passed down to this dynasty by luck. Once the emperor and the courtiers, it will be difficult to order the immortals. Zhu Lian smiled and said, it's just right to be full of 8. The more Cui Dongshan looked at it, the more he felt there was a way out, and he exclaimed, but if Mr. is willing to take this thing and take this thing to Juda Mountain, it is estimated that he can directly exchange it for a Taisheng Dang Dang. As long as Mr. is willing to make a price, Juda the mountainside will definitely sell iron, even if they owe a debt, they are willing to buy it. Cui Dongshan said with emotion, our wealth is finally not thin. This Taoist picture of the old Guanju who just succeeded, and the couplets that Wu Shuangjiang gave before. The former can be placed in the Patriarch Hall of Jiaisfeng, and the latter can be hung at the entrance of the Patriarch Hall of the lower sect of Tonggishao. Owning these two treasures of the town, Luopa Mountain and the future Xiaozong, you truly have the immortality and confidence of the first-class sect. In addition, there are 2 copybooks that the old scholar asked for from Su Zi and Lu Qi. The flowers are posted, and the drunk posts are all energetic and enlightenment. There is both charcoal in the snow and icing on the cake. In the future, as long as Luopa Mountain really opens its branches and leaves, it is estimated that a lot of reading seeds will emerge. Cui Dongshan turned his head and shouted at the millet grain, the right guard has made another great contribution after sailing overnight. At the beginning of the night ship, Chen Pingan and his party were sent to the side by Wu Shuang to wait and see. The result was good, but the process was extremely dangerous. After that, if it weren't for the ingenuity of the millet grains, with Wu Shuangjiang's indifferent temperament, he would not be able to give out the treasure of Jinshan with the rank of immortal soldier under the premise that he had already sent out a piece of, at the time. This post at the time is now hung in the first floor of the bamboo building where Chen Pingan lived. The 2 seals printed on the copybook have lost all the rhyme of Taoism and replaced it with the repair of the outer Huatian demon. For each word has a realm. There is only one monogram left in the copybook, heart is like a green lotus in the world, still mysterious. The millet grains were so confused that they couldn't even take a look at it. He scratched his head and asked, what? Why did you do something again? Cui Dongshan puts a pair of shaft heads in his sleeves, and is ready to start to refining and melting the 2 things and the Taoist book. It is a dual purpose. Don't delay Cui Dongshan's chat with the millet grains. Say it, you must take this credit. Xiao Mili stood up, ran all the way to the table, and asked curiously, is the things the old master gave us always valuable? Zhu Lian smiled and nodded, it's valuable. The two scroll heads are quite old, if it's just that picture. The millet grains were soaring, and he laughed and said, the old man is an old leader, and the old things he gave are always valuable. The little girl in black did not patronize and was happy. She looked over the mountain road, scratched her face, and whispered, I don't know when I will be a guest again. The temper of the old master is very good. Rao is Cui Dongshan, who has to be speechless. This old master of the East China Sea has a good temper, that is recognized by the mountain. Millet grains retracted their gaze, lay on the table, and said with a smile, Old chef, I have done a good job again. When the good people and mountain masters return home from the capital, you can help us make a good meal. It must be better than the best. It's more delicious, don't you know, can't it? Xiaomili didn't even ask how much the credit was, as if her little head, melon seeds, could not think of these things at all. Zhu Lian smiled and nodded, no problem. In fact, on the night ship, Wu Shuangjiang also gave an extra set of zhou rice grains, a set of Wenfang Qing to supply zhou rice grains, which are all things Wu Shuangjiang carried with him, and the vision of the Sui Chu Gong Palace master was so high in the world. They are all famous, and you can imagine their appearance. The three magic weapons are invaluable and each has a magical effect. Back to Luopa Mountain, the millet grains were immediately sent out, and the Qibao mud, which was known as 1 or 2 colored mud and 1 caddy of rain money, was given to Sister Wanshu. Then gave the ancient inkstone with the inscription Xinxian Cave and a pair of pocket dragons to Jingqing. As for the green bamboo brush, there is a line of small seals, and the chest is full of bamboo. Was given by millet grains to Wei Shanjun, who was so poor that he could only spend nights and banquets and earn red envelopes. Cui Dongshan exhaled, it's done. Zhu Lian was surprised, so fast. Cui Dongshan grinned and said, it's not too fast for Brother Dafing to look at those fairy pictures, just flip a few pages and it's done. Anyway, Xing Dafing is not there, just say it. Zhu Lian smiled and said, after all, he is still a young and strong guy who can pancakes on his ass. If he is replaced by Wei Shanjun, he will definitely be able to turn to the end. Wei Bo was not there anyway. Fortunately, the millet grains did not hear this, and was planning to write a menu for the old cook. Thinking of a dinner table, full of dishes and plates, people don't know how to put the chopsticks there first. The more they think about it, the more greedy. Hurry Up wiped his mouth. Cui Dongshan took out the complete road map with the shaft head, gently placed it on the table, and smiled. The old master of the world really knows the world, and the world is unparalleled. After Daotu is refined, purple air is lingering and clouds rise, as if a table is a world of Daofa, and the vision of the sun and the moon is faintly visible. On the top of the mountains, there is no 2 days, and there is a month in the tens of thousands of trees. In the heart of Cui Dongshan and Zhu Lian, they just listened to the old master sneer, pick up people's teeth. Cui Dongshan pinched Dao Ju with both hands, meditating silently in his heart, a book on the table, fleeting, and the next moment, the whole desolate mountain boundary is covered with purple air. Weibo shrank the mountains and rivers, and immediately came from Piyun Mountain to the table side of Luopa Mountain. Weibo's heart was shaken, and he used Shanjun's life and supernatural powers, looked around, and his vision, he was like being in a sea of purple clouds, and at the same time, he even felt a breath of victory over the great road, which made Dang Tang Beiyue Dashin feel uncomfortable, and the momentum of this victory is getting heavier and heavier. Weibo smiled bitterly. Could it be that I can only show up in the future? On the edge of the fallen mountain boundary, walk to this point. Monarch Deiyue Mountain, walking on his own site is inconvenient, and he has to walk on foot. It is estimated that the joke that spreads out is more laughable than the joke at night. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, it's okay. I will set up a gate on the mountain and under the mountain to make sure that Mr. Wei Shan goes back and forth at will. The higher the realm of the mountain and water gods and the cultivators, the more uncomfortable they are. Even if the Qixin and his like were aware of it, they would not be struggling like Wei Bo. Moreover, this Taoist book cannot be in a state of being unfolded all the time, otherwise the Tao Qi will be scattered, and it will be more self-gathering and replenishment than the aura of the heavens and the earth, and the mountains and rivers will be able to make ends meet. Wei Bo didn't care about this. He took a seat and asked, "What's the matter?" The old master of Donghai was sitting in Brother Wei's position just now. Cui Dongshan shook his snow-white sleeves and said with a smile, "As for the inside story, I won't say much, I don't know better. There is a cloud in Buddhism, and the proposal is by Yun Wanli." Wei Bo stood up in silence and changed seats. At the top of the cloud mountain, the old Guan looked up, and saw that the mountain monarch surnamed Wei is still quite interesting, and then quietly left. Cui Dongshan said, "Since the weather is about to change, we should plan ahead and make plans early. Anyway, Wei Bo is not an outsider. As long as those illusory avenues of luck are not involved, there is nothing to say." Zhu Lian nodded and said, "You must not have the heart to harm others, and you must not have the heart to defend against others." Before, Chen Pingan targeted the swordsman Pei Min, an ascendant sword repairman, and later in the night sailing battle, he dealt with Wu Shuangjiang's 14 realms. Now it seems that it is necessary. Far away, Zhou Zi. Swordsmanship Pei Min, Jianxiu Lu Kai. Closer, the great sword fairy Bai Chang who had fallen short of Luzhou in Beiju. The behind-the-scenes forces including Han Yushu. The rivers and lakes are sinister, treacherous, unpredictable, and making friends is often making enemies. Cui Dongshan said, "The only thing missing now is the realm of the husband. The most powerful attack on Luopa Mountain is on the top of the mountain. The mountain Song Yuzhang has been transferred to Chiduan Mountain by the Dali court, and opened a separate mountain shrine and temple. The former site of the mountain temple on the top of the Luopa Mountain has not been demolished and reconstructed. The original appearance is maintained, but the plaque has been taken off. Cui Dongshanzi, a golden thunder pond was set up along the white jade railing to enshrine the sword fairy picture from the Great Wall of Sword Qi. It was originally from the upside-down mountain Jingjian Pavilion, and was later handed over to Chen Pingan by the old sword fairy. On the side of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, those sword immortals in the posture of heroic spirits have accompanied young hidden officials for many years, fending off enemies together, and guarding half of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. In addition, Luopa Mountain also has a set of sword formations born out of Taiping Mountain in Tonggishao, but it has not yet been completed so far and can be used as an aid in the future. Zhu Lian said, "With the temper of the sun, the sword formation scroll will definitely be returned to Feishengcheng." Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "Don't worry, with the temper of the teacher, you will definitely not accept it. Moreover, in the long run, the picture scroll will remain in the Luopa Mountain. For Feishengcheng, it is a cost-effective business with a steady profit." Xiaomili nodded and said, don't worry, we are good people, and we will listen to Mrs. Shanju anyway." Zhu Lian shook his head and smiled, "Wrong, as long as you encounter real major events, Miss Ning will still listen to the sun." Xiaomili thought for a while, "It seems to be a lass." Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "Even without the sword fairy formation, now in Aquarius Island, if we don't take the initiative, others should burn incense." Took out a folding fan of Yuzhu, Cui Dongshan gently fanned, while writing to convince people with morality, while writing that he refused to accept and killed him. Wei Bo said, "I have already helped out the matter of Luopa Shan not accepting disciples, but it doesn't seem to be very useful, and the effect is very average. More and more people will come here in the future." Cui Dongshan helped the millet grains fan and smiled and said, "Normally, everyone is curious to see flowers in the fog. In the end, we still have to talk about chances if we can climb the mountain. Who can knock the seeds of millet grains? No. Yes. Millet Grain sat on the bench, shook his little feet, the breeze was blowing, and he pulled the cotton satchel, laughing. Wei Wei asked with a smile, Millet, have you thought about it? What are you going to give in return? The green bamboo pen presented by Millet Grains is of great significance to Wei Bo, and he won't change it with a half-soldier. Chen Lingjun had previously escorted Millet Grains to Piyun Mountain, and now he goes to the bamboo forest from time to time, but in the summer and autumn, he said to see if there are any bamboo shoots to dig. Xiao Milik shook his head and said, no need, just a polite hammer, Mr. Wei Shan will see you outside. Wei Bo stood up, touched the head of the millet grain, and left. The millet grains went back to the small bamboo chair to watch the door, and let the old cook and the big white goose continue to talk about business. Cui Dongshan wrapped his arms in his sleeves and said, the old master seems to be treating you with admiration. Zhu Lian laughed off. According to legend, Lu Qin has 5 dreams, each with unreasonable avenue manifestations. Among them is the real bones of Taoism, and the scholar Xingqiang of Confucianism. In addition, there are 7 mysterious minds, wooden chickens, trees, moles, kuanping, cardinals, buzzards, and butterflies. Among them, Eugenie, who was the first to cultivate immortality in Uwafuti, was the wooden chicken who was dumbfounded. Uwafuti's picture scroll 4 people, although according to the definition of Haren Tianxia, they are all genuine and pure martial arts, but the 4 have their own emphasis. Sui right side, perseverance, directly gave up martial arts, turned to mountaineering and became sword repairers. Wei Xian never intended to reach the top of martial arts, preferring to be on the battlefield and to be an official, the biggest official. God knows if this guy who claims to drink a lot of alcohol will directly find a site in the future, such as the Tongya Island broken in the mountains and rivers, and become the founding emperor again. Liu Baixiang seems to be the least ambitious compared to Sui right side and Wei Xian. As for Zhu Lian, in the eyes of outsiders, he is the one who does not seek improvement. Cui Dongshan closed the folding fan and looked up at the sky, by Yujing. So Jiang Shangzhen learned everything, saying that Qilong Alley is definitely a treasure of geomantic omen. He learned the law of palm and has a long life. He spent a lot of money to buy 3 houses in Qilong Alley. What kind of ability is money? It's willing to spend money. Jiang Shang really lived longer than that man, and he was much more generous. It was meaningless to say that the competition for fame and fortune other than food and clothing is always petty. So at the wine table, the chief of the week threw all 3 sets of keys to the blind old Taoist priest, saying that they were all his own brothers. In the future, Brother Jia will help increase the popularity of the warm house. I will not talk about them. Money is no longer money, and it hurts brotherhood for nothing. The old fairy Jia was flushed with drinks, his face was awe-inspiring. He took the key, waved his hand, and talked about money between brothers. The blind old Taoist took the 2 apprentices and moved to a new house that same day. The expensive furnishings in the house are estimated to be the same as the generals of Dali capital. He stood at the door, dressed in a snow-white robe of the fallen mountain palm. Chen Lingjun immediately put his foot off the bench and shouted, Sister Changming. Old immortal Jia also immediately put down the wine bowl in his hand and raised his subconsciously. Seeing that the brother Lingjun did not get up, but did not put down his ass, he did not hesitate to hang his in the air and bend down slightly. As for whether the woman could see this scene, the old gods don't care. Where does this evening blessing come from? In addition to the unique insight of the mountain owner, he was singled out in the vast sea of people, and he was a strong old hero, and he also relied on this kind of sincere treatment that is compatible with the road of Luopa Mountain. I see that the high is first short. On one end, the old smiled and said, Zhanglu came to the cold house, and the expensive feet are on the cheap ground. It is really a celebration of chai men, the flourishing of the house, the bitterness without alcohol and wine, if you don't mind the long life of the palm. Long Life squinted and smiled, mind. The old fairy Jia changed his speech, the palm is fast and the people talk quickly, and teach people to save worry and effort. Chengming said, if you block the way, you have a snack. The old fairy Jia said solemnly, I have no shirk. Minger will go out in person. Previously, there was no mention of his name on the side of Luopa Mountain. It was only to let the disciple Zhao Dengao work on this matter. Old Shenxian Jia held it back. Otherwise, he only talked about the ability to deal with people. Jia Xing thinks he is in Luopa Mountain and can be ranked the least. Often squat on the ground and ask if you want to eat. That's the one. As long as the hero threatens to challenge Pei Qian, Bai Xian is prepared to not fall behind, and all are carefully recorded, name and nickname, hometown, martial arts state. Chen Lingjun did not interfere with this for the first time ever. Nuanshu and Xia Miliang were very surprised. Of course, Chen Lingjun was pretending to be an expert, his mother, a mixture of fish and dragons, and God knows if there was any expert who beat him to death. After all, in a huge river and lake, it is impossible to meet a good brother like Busy and Qin Qinglu. The rivers and lakes outside are difficult to mix, and it is not enough to rely on boldness. On the road to practice, there are either wild horses or pigs out of the pen, one by one. Today was a big table for dinner, it was lively. It is still the old rule that cannot be beaten by thunder. If Qin Pingan is not on the mountain, the main bench will be empty and must be left to the mountain owner. Zhu Lian, Cui Dongshan, Miyu, Chen Wanshu, Millet Grains, Chen Lingjun, Zhang Jiazhen. There is also Bai Xian who likes to come here to eat and drink. Wei Wenlong, who doesn't show up very much, is not a cultivator of Jin Danqi. He doesn't need to use grains. It's not how the god of wealth of the fallen mountain is so withdrawn. He is obsessed with settling accounts. Every book is just his daughter-in-law. As for Zhao Shuxia and Zhao Dengao, they walk back to the town every day, taking turns to watch the night on the road, one mountain master's biography, one named Offering, and the two have a good relationship now. They are obviously very different styles from Chen Lingjun and Bai Xian. Chen Lingjun was suffocating at the dinner table. Old cook, I heard that when you were young, you were still the only beautiful man in 10 miles and 8 villages. Zhu Lian every chopsticks, no matter what the food, will chew slowly, so, barely ugly. Chen Lingjun smiled and said, then you are still a bachelor. When you were young, your eyes were too high and you didn't have a satisfied girl. In the end, you can only be like Brother Dofing. Zhu Lian smiled and said, forget that you are older than me. Chen Ling all eats flat. Millet Grains raised her palms to her mouth, and asked Nuanshu's sister quietly, how old is Jingqing? The girl in the pink skirt looked at the boy in Qingyi, shook her head, and whispered, I haven't asked. I don't know. Chen Lingjun patted the table, stupid girl, coveting my beauty, right? I was caught upright, ah. As a result, Miyu slapped Miyu on the back of the head. Chen Lingjun bowed his head and pulled the rice in the bowl. The sword immortal me dared to provoke him, he was a little depressed. Cui Wei is a sword repairer in the Yuaning realm of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. As a result, he saw his grandfather like his grandson on Miye's side. Chen Lingjun felt that something was wrong before. When we were walking at night together, Jiang Shangjin looked at the bright-eyed young man, who was no longer a poor boy from the Great Wall of Jinqi, Mr. Xiaofang, as if saying, Mr. Chen brought me here from my hometown, then I would try my best not to let him. Mr. Chen was disappointed. This was a matter of course, and it was not hard at all. Jiang Shangjin handed over a jug of wine. Zhang Jiazhen said that she had to read a few account books when she went back, so she stopped drinking. Jiang Shangzhen smiled and said that if he didn't drink too much, he would be fine and refreshing. Zhang Jiazhen accepted the pot of wine. Zhang Jiazhen went back to the room, looked through the account books under the lamp, did not drink, just planned to take it, and occasionally was really tired, rubbed his brows, glanced at the hip flask on the table, held back a smile, and said to herself, Zhang Jiazhen, now bullish. Oh, this is the drink that Sect Master Jiang personally gave you. I didn't know. That Sect Master Jiang was sitting on the wall with arms around his chest, squinting and smiling, without alcohol in his hands, like drinking alcohol. Loper Mountain is time to hold the mirror flower water moon of its own mountain. Zhu Lian smiled and said, when the sun returns home, let's discuss the beautiful things, which mountain to do, who will do what, we need to discuss it carefully. Bai Xianqi smiled and said, discuss a hammer and let me Daijiangxian stop over there. The entire Aquarius Island ferries are going to commit nympho, that's smashed ferry money. Mia shook his chopsticks, compared to the mountain owner, it's still far behind. Bai Xian said with white eyes, I said you are better than Master Hermit. Follow me here. Mia kept smiling and gave Bai Xian a chopstick dish, if you can talk so well, eat more. Bai Xian sneered and said, what, you learn from that money, do you have a grudge? Cui Dongshan laughed. Bai Xian immediately took a chopstick to Cui Dongshan, and asked curiously, apart from hidden officer, is there anyone Pei Qian is afraid of? Cui Dongshan said, yes, Guizhuzhou. Bai Xian was stunned for a long time. Of course, he had heard of Guizhuzhou in his hometown, of famous existence. She seemed to have entered the summer palace as a hidden official sword repairer. After a meal, Nuan Shu and Xiaomili helped to clean up the dishes, but in the end, the old cook was alone, and the two little girls were not asked to help. They put on aprons and washed them in the stove alone. Zhu Lian cleaned up, took off his apron, walked out of the stove, and smiled. Everyone is a book writer in their own life, and at the same time, looking at others is turning the book. Maybe the world takes us very lightly, but we take ourselves too seriously. A ferry slowly entered the land of Dali capital. Two monks from the earthly branch, Song Su and Yu Yufeng boarded the ship. You can do it, there is no officialdom in these years. I can talk more than when I was a kid. Zhao Yu laughed and said, you can do two things with one stone, and everyone is happy. Song Su was a little surprised. Although Zhao Yao is a young official in the center, he does treat people kindly. He has a very good reputation in the Dali court. The only flaw is that he lacks a clear body of imperial examination fame. Make contributions on the battlefield. The carp jumps through the dragon gate. Jin Mao Cave, Wild Fox Meditation. Ku Song Su always thinks that Zhao Yu is an extremely proud and arrogant man. Like a lonely cloud and wild crane that only stops and rests in that temple, one day, it will row out the clouds and shake its wings in the blue sky. Nowadays, the ruling and opposition parties are all curious about the fact that King Songmu and Zhao Yu of the Ministry of Rights can be regarded as direct disciples of Wen Xing's line. Song Jisin joked, I have seen your Uncle Qin. How are you doing? Zhao Shi smiled and said, not bad, very harmonious. Leaving the alley where Zhou Haijing was temporarily staying, Chen Pingan was unsteady, raised his foot and stomped on the ground, and then took the next step, making it much easier. Chen Pingan raised a hand, slightly rusty, but still instantly gathered the aftermath of Taoism. The self who stayed in the Howran world is the same 14th realm. Therefore, Chen Pingan is just such a simple stomping action. For Dai capital, it is a stormy weather. Chen Pingan glanced at the direction of the Jingqing Qintian supervisor. He must have been aware of it, and of course there is also the imitation by Yujing who accompanied the capital. The Qintian supervisory office in the Dali capital city is a heavily guarded forbidden area. It is said that the level of martial law is second only to Miyagi and the imperial tombs. There are not many people, and the total number of officials from various academies is less than 200. Among the many yamen in Delhi, it is the most clouded and foggy place, without mountains where dew is mostly passed down from generation to generation, and the sons inherit their father's business. All officials of the Chintian supervisor shall not be transferred to other officials. If there are vacancies, they will be filled in the Chintian supervisor level by level. Non-special decree of the imperial court shall not be easily promoted or resigned. Therefore, it is an iron rice bowl that cannot be thrown away. It has two meanings. Without outsiders vying for it, you can't let it go. Although all officials of the Chintian supervisor are in the Delhi capital, they are actually isolated from the world and have little contact with the outside world. Every time they go out, they need to be reviewed and reported by the internal and the Ministry of Etiquette. Each time they go out, they are specially made. Guandi, once used, needs to be destroyed and then recorded. The people inside dare not make friends with clinging officials, and the Beijing officials outside dare not deal with the Chintian supervisor. If it's a little bit cross-boundary, it's easy to throw off the official hat, or the kind where the head falls along with it. Chen Pingan walked slowly in an alley. The same rice raises hundreds of people. Looking at this vast world, it seems that everyone is blind and touching the elephant. Different fields of view and different angles will result in different results. Pure martial arts, as far as the field of vision can be, many real objects are all dazzling, and the cultivator can vaguely see the circulation of the spiritual energy of the heavens and the earth, in addition to the spirit of the gods. As Chen Ping's thoughts fluctuated, the world seemed to have undergone subtle changes. The closer to the direction of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, or the wild world, the current realm temporarily borrowed from Lu Qin will decay faster. When the same person came, there was still a distinction between primary and secondary. This is reasonable. Otherwise, by relying on the 14-realm cultivation base, rushing to the barren world, wouldn't it be equivalent to creating two 14 realms out of thin air? The Saint of Rights was at the Reunion building. Why did you agree to try again? Have you already seen this step along the upstream and downstream of that long river of time? Then Li Sheng hopes to take this opportunity to do what? If the saints of rituals do it casually and have no purpose, then Chen Pingan, who possesses this method, can actually do many things, such as going back to his hometown of Luopa Mountain, or traveling far to the north at the cost of falling down Luzhou or Tongisao. Broadcast, the novel app I'm using recently, both Android and iPhone support. Chen Pingan suddenly had a strong thought. Stepped out of Delhi capital and appeared directly in the backyard of Yang's pharmacy. As a result, I saw a young Taoist priest. Daozu smiled and asked, since childhood, alone, looking after the stars of the past, is it hard to work? Sort of coming. Chapter 854. The juvenile Dao Tong stood on the steps, and the old man Yang from the drugstore often sat there holding a dry tobacco rod, swallowing clouds and fog. Standing under the eaves, Chen Pingan hit a well-mannered chief inspector, silent. It's not that Chen Pingan is playing mystery, but that he really doesn't know how to answer. The main reason is that Li Lu is involved, so he has to bite the bullet and get bored. The young Dao Tong shook his sleeves and returned to a Confucian polite, smiling without saying a word. The boy sat on the steps and stretched out a hand. Sit anywhere, we are all guests, so don't worry too much. I am a passerby, and so are you temporarily, but not necessarily in the future. Chen Pingan moved to sit on the bench, and sat opposite the young man on the patio where he returned to the hall by 4 waters. There is no need to guess the identity of the young Taoist boy in front of him. Once riding a bull to pass through the barren world, he would hit the old throne great demon back to the bottom of the ancient well with a single finger, leaving an indelible mark on his opponent for thousands of years. It even made the great ancestor ascend far away from the sky, and dare not show up. Rao is Dao Chang's son of Dakshuanda Temple, such a master of Taoism who will greet the true invincibility every 3 chasing 5. It is rumored that when he traveled the vast world, he and Bai Yi and others often mentioned the Dao ancestor who founded Bai Yujing, the same as Yu Rongyan, vowed to guarantee that the best fight in the world is our Qingming world. On Deus's side, pretending to understand and pretending to be confused is meaningless. As for pretending to be confused, it is even more laughable and generous. Dao ancestor glanced at the 14 scenes of Qin Pingan and said with a smile, "The word ritual is difficult to have both reason and reason. The little master is still very powerful." Then Daozu said, "You can accommodate the realm of Lu Xin, with very little dispersal, not only because of the saints of etiquette and Lu Xin, but also because of your own empty boat. It has a lot to do with Dao. Collecting the virtual, the empty heart is also the heart, and the empty one is wide. Just say that among the people you know, Zhou Mi, Cui Yang, Qi Jingchen, Jing Juzhong, and Wu Shuangjiang are all similar scholars. To put it in a more common way, one person you can eat a lot on an empty stomach. Why can a Taoist person be different from ordinary people? What is meant by entering a mountain to cultivate immortals? It is nothing more than cutting a mountain into a house, moving out the 7 emotions, 6 desires, distracting thoughts and turbidity of the ordinary master, and bringing the heaven and earth aura and the opportunity with merit and blessing, move in. Sitting in a blue shirt, like a Mongolian boy who has just read and read. Nowadays, the mountain monks in the world, whether they are in the ascending realm or the 14th realm, dare not call Zhou Mi by name, for fear of revealing the secret of the world to the sky. Daozu smiled. This guy seems to be kept in the dark, and it is normal. How can one be recognized by the sword holder when he was young? 2 seniors also stared at him. Chen Pingan naturally broke his head and couldn't think of himself. After so many years of traveling on the road, it was not only Bing's night tour, but also a lantern during the day. It's just that Dao Zhu is not in a hurry to explain the matter, and asks, "You have been close to Buddhism since you were a child, and you have quite a lot of experience about the affirmation and negation, so you must know the 3 sentences." Chen Pingan nodded. Buddha said that the world is not a world, hence the name of the world. Daozu smiled and said, "Good words, but let's talk more about it. Let me give you an example. The truth is that the sky is empty, the example is the post-station ferry, so that the listener can have a foothold. Otherwise, the expert can reason and ride a crane to Yangzhou." Chen Pingan said, "Su Zi has poems, Danzhou Yinsha Qianzhang Chao, you can't hate it in every possible way, and there is nothing to do when you reach Yuan, Danzhou Yinsha Qianzhang Chao." Dao Zhu said, "Speak again." Chen Pingan replied, "Dao can be very Taoist." Dao Zhu smiled and said, "No wonder Su Zi gave a copybook, which is more enjoyable than Lu Qi. No wonder Sun Guanzhu added blue eyes to you." When he returned to his hometown, he would say that Haoran has a little Daoist in the world and he is a wonderful person. Chen Pingan was a little embarrassed. His reputation was already full of the streets before he went to Qingming world. Does this count as the fragrance of wine? Are you afraid of the deep alley? Dao Zhu asked, "Have you ever thought about why your 2 brothers dared to catch turtles in the urn? 10,000 years ago, the 3 of us could not completely solve the legacy of the old heavenly court ruins. It's even more difficult. But now that the 3 of us are going to go out of the way, it's not as good as sparse to prevent water control. Cui Yang and Qi Jingchen are not short-sighted people. Why don't you understand? Think about it again. When the public is ascending to the sky, what is he waiting for? To make up for the lack of God's position is similar to the Qintian supervisor of our secular dynasty. There is always a carrot in a hole." Dao Zhu said with a smile, can't show me, just wait for the three of us to block the door, right? Chen Pingan shook his head and said, the juniors don't understand. Because there is something in the world, Xiaomi has lost all secrets. Dao Zhu raised his arm and pointed at Chen Pingan, it's you, the bird in the cage. The heavens are thorough, and the earth is Chen Pingan. What Gu Kan sees may be Song Jisin, or the finishing touch Xiao Yu. What Wan Xiu sees, it may be the handwritings of Chen Pingan or Lu Xianyang in Ni Ping Lane. Only one thing can be certain, no matter who sees it. It's not my own handwriting. Dao Zhu smiled and said, when you recognize something in your mind, you will continue to find reasons and arguments to support your understanding. Kiln workers, butchers, wokers, carpenters, woodcutters find firewood, and fishermen find fish because of their skill. Each is different, so when you look at the same world, each will have its own focus. Chen Pingan frowned and asked tentatively, those words are similar to the town of Red Candle. It's like a confluence of a long river of time. So anyone can be, and no one can engrave. Daozu answered the question, the reason why Qintong Tianjun set up this prohibition is so that you young people will not be too overworked on the road of spiritual practice in the future. Of course, they are even more worried. After being broken in the Lizhu cave and taking root, you will lose one. The barrier that cuts off the secrets of heaven, the younger generation travels out one after another, and they will reveal clues about that one prematurely. Regarding the direction of the long river of time, it is not a small taboo, and the cultivator has to explore it by himself. Dao Zhu smiled and said, now can you answer the previous question? Chen Pingan turned his head subconsciously and glanced at the direction of Mud Bottle Alley. Walking from the alley to the drugstore, if you have money to buy medicine, snowy weather, muddy roads, you will walk lightly, and there is no money in your pocket. The same journey, even if the spring flowers bloom all the way, will make people stagger and tired. Why is it so? The state of mind dictates. Law is not alone, but rises according to circumstances. Traveling through mountains and rivers, but not procrastinating, this is what Buddhism calls the mind and the trouble. What's more, his own husband also specially commented on the phrase, the human heart is in danger, but the Taoist heart is weak. When I was young, I was asked the most about the burning of porcelain. It was nothing more than 2 words. The direction of the heart, the direction of the hand. Chen Pingan said, you don't have to go shopping alone, just to find a coin on the ground, and you don't have to wait for other houses to open the door. I don't think it is hard. Daozi smiled and asked, have you picked up money? Chen Pingan said with a face, I really picked up a few of them. In the night when helping people to grab water, a child was lying on a field ridge, with Erlang's legs upturned, chewing on the roots of the grass. The star was shining above his head. The child held up a copper coin he had picked up on the ground during the day. There is another person in by Yujing, on the contrary, I think one of the so-called transcendence avenues in countless heaven and earth is just an extra red dot on our arm, which breaks with a flick of his finger. Your brother Cui Huang had already thought of this. Generally speaking, it is the one of Lu Qin. The idea is relatively unsolvable. If you come to Bai Yujing as a guest in the future, you can talk to him in detail. Daozu said, just walk here. Chen Pingan made an effort. Daozu smiled and returned a Daomen chief inspector. In the next moment, Chen Pingan returned to Dali capital. After thinking about it, he went to Qin Tianjian. Inside a room of the Dali Qin Tianjian, someone was burning incense, and the fairy mist curled up. An outsider who just lived in the Qin Tianjian, with a young face and surnamed Yuan, has helped a lot in the Taisha Bureau over the years. Because he is proficient in the latitude and longitude, moon phases, concocting techniques and secret rate, he has perfected the Qin Tianjian breath difference and fading method. It was this person who had placed a small incense burner in front of him, holding an incense chopstick, and burning Gannan incense. It was just the supervisor and deputy supervisor of the Qintian supervisor who looked at each other face to face at this moment. The two old monks were still very leisurely and ridiculed a few words similar to the official debts often owed to books and burning incense to read Su's words. Before Chen Pingan's shot at the inn in the capital, and then Ning Yao's sword, the movements were very loud, but they were not as shocking as the vision at that moment. The deputy supervisor asked in a low voice, "Master Supervisor, this hidden official, is it a hidden ascendant sword repairman?" Jianzheng stretched out his palms, looked at the cracked ancient tortoise shell, and sighed, "Your guess seems to be low." The supervisor suddenly slapped his knees with his palms, killing to death. It is absolutely unreasonable. Even if Chen Pingan is a Ascension Realm sword repair, the supervisor did not believe it. The Yupu Realm swordsman, who was in her early 40s, was already shocking enough. As for that Ning Yao, what did she do? Jianzheng sighed, "No matter what the truth is, the situation is the current situation. The dragon is entrenched in Xiaotang," shaking his head and tail casually. "For Dali capital, it is an unstoppable stormy sea. With force, it's an idiot dreaming. How does it make sense? Haha, Wenxing's family lineage." The deputy supervisor said tentatively, then only moving emotions. Jianzheng's mind was shaken, Chen Pingan really came. However, the old monk still looked complacent, pretending to nod it suddenly and said, "I must report this to your majesty immediately, and there will be a deputy labor supervision officer who will treat the guests on his behalf." I remembered that the deputy supervisor was Shinaya Academy in the early years and said no. Those who are less conscientious and express affection are the most appropriate. Apart from anything else, Chen Pingan is still a nostalgic person. You can tell him about affection and prescribe the right medicine for the case. The prisoner had a hard time saying that at the Changchun Palace, I was really badly hurt by the Queen Mother Dallas pit. Before Chen Pingan watched Jingyang Mountain, he lay on a wicker chair at the Guyunla Inn and rested. To take out the piece of natal porcelain, order him to use his palm to observe the mountains and rivers, and to observe Chen Pingan from a distance. The result is good. If you use the quack and lake argument, the two sides are considered to be a bridge. Finally, the supervisor and the deputy, the two old men looked at the young monk who was always silent, "Mr. Yuan." The young monk smiled and said, "I have come, since I can't drive away, I just watched the changes. Anyway, the worst result is that the Qin Tianjian was demolished. Anyway, Dai is rich now. A Qintian jail, for Chen Pingan at the moment, is like entering no one. Glancing at the plaque, observe the timing. Seeing good and bad things from the sky, the sage chooses it. Qin Tianjian's Qi trainers observe the celestial phenomena, calculate solar terms, establish Xingshua, and compile calendars. They need to tell the emperor those signs of rise and fall. Heaven and earth have already placed the Xiang there, like a book spread out, and everyone in the world can read it casually, and the monks can read it more diligently, and all the gains may be their own way and state. The Xiang in the sky, the Xiang in the radicals of the human character, the cultivation of the Tao and the attainment of the Tao, is probably the purpose of one's cultivation, and ultimately it seems to be as immortal as the sky and the earth. Chen Pingan stepped into a library full of multiple landscape restrictions, and he sighed in his heart. He deserves to be the third master of Bai Yujing, who is, no one can beat, no one can beat. The truth cannot be simpler. Lu Chen is like all alone, alone in a complete world with no gaps in the avenue. Besides, all the people of the world live together in another world, without hindrance, and the well water does not offend the river. I just don't know whether the sword repair of the 14th realm, with one sword, can cut through the barriers of the avenue. There are almost no practice secrets on the Ren Yuniyun Tower. Most of them are masterpieces handed down by the 3 religious scholars in 100 schools. That's why Chen Pingan wanted to come here to read. Because the realm is there, the book is turned extremely fast, the spiritual consciousness is slightly moved, and after reading a book in a flash, some ancient books that have made his mind move slightly, Chen Pingan takes down from the shelf and silently writes them down. Those key statements. Even the mountains are like mountains, and the air comes out. Is it related to the 3 mountain talisman? The dragon is transformed into the snake and submerged in the dragon. Will there be such a fierce thing hidden by this secret technique in the wild world? All gods sweep the floor and burn incense. Is it related to ancient sacrifices? In the end, Chen Pingan took a few books, walked through the wall, put the books under his arm, and stood against the railing in a blue shirt. On the other side of the square, a group of monks from the Qintian supervisors gathered. They were not very old, and they had a child's comb-horn bun, dressed in green clothes, and their style was simple. In addition, there are also Yudu Zhu Shi, Si Chen Shi, and young girls with different clothes. A group of people are on the steps, standing or sitting, standing and sitting, but no one is lazy. After all, the Qintian supervisor still has strict rules. What they talked about the most was, of course, the arena competition between Yu Hong and Zhou Haijing. Then there are some experiences of landscapes that go out to experience, and it is not easy for Qintianjian's gas trainers to go out, so every time you travel, the journey to the landscape will not be short, and you will often walk around half of Aquarius Island, and your whereabouts are secret. Every time they travel far, there will be 2 groups of people secretly guarding the road, the Ministry of Penalty of the Great Li and the monks who accompanied the army from all over the country, so there is no room for mistakes. The Li Qintianjian's qi watching technique is rare, not worse than sword repair. Chen Pingan was hesitating whether to return to the town and go to Yang's shop to read the letter, or go to the inn to find Pei Qian and Chao Sunny, or go to the ferry to meet the 2 nephews. Or go to the palace directly. Looking at the generally carefree teenagers and girls, Chen Pingan had to sigh, lush years, when the most lovely. Qintian's supervisor is divided into astronomy department, geography department, omission department, calendar department, 5 elements department and sacrifice department. The Taisha Bureau, the Arithmetic Bureau, and the Construction Bureau have recently established the Boundary Bureau, the Shanda Bureau and the Dialect Bureau. In addition, there are also some Qingshui Yamen in the Bell and Drum Academy and the Indian calendar. Among them, the calendar is carved, also called Lintai. The newly established Boundary Bureau is responsible for managing the yellow scale albums of the dynasties for the royal family. As for the Dialect Bureau, the Izhou dialect was compiled by the Ministry of Rites, and the minister Zhao Yao specifically abbot the matter, and finally deposited it in the Qin Tianjian. This is a huge expense involving immortal money, and the Ministry of Household has not cursed his mother. Even if it was him, the deputy supervisor, who wanted to check, he had to nod and agree to the other 2. Any book he turned over would be recorded. With Chen Ping's current realm and Taoism that seems to fall from the sky, it is actually not difficult to find traces of the formation, even taking a book and going back and forth, it is destined to be unknown. Yuan Tianfeng smiled and asked, Lord Chen Shan, do you believe me? Chen Pingan nodded and smiled without hesitation, of course I believe. Yuan Tianfeng suddenly painted a circle with a whisk in his hand, and then used the whisk to split it in the middle, so. Chen Pingan shook his head, raised his hand, and put his fingers together. It was also drawing a circle, but it was not fully connected, and then it seemed to deviate slightly, except that the line did not extend. Yuan Tianfeng nodded. The vice supervisor on the side stroked his beard and smiled. As for whether I understand or not, you 2 can guess. Chen Pingan asked in his heart, Mr. Yuan is studying how to deal with the Wawawation demon. Yuan Tianfeng did not deny the matter, but said helplessly, it is as difficult as climbing the sky to fight against the sea. Yuan Tianfeng seemed to be a little bit late, and didn't ask until this moment, Master Chen Shan has heard of me? Chen Pingan nodded and said, Senior brother values Mr. Yuan very much. Yuan Tianfeng didn't care too much, but asked, Master Chen is proficient in arithmetic. Chen Pingan smiled and said, the more I look at it, the more headaches I get, but it's not bad to use it for luminescence. Yuan Tianfeng regretfully said, in fact, there is one way to do it. It should be included in the Dali Imperial examination. The proportion is not small. I heard that Cui Guosher had this intention, but unfortunately it was not implemented in the end. Chen Pingan hesitated to speak but stopped. Yuan Tianfeng was puzzled. Does Chen Shanju have objections? Or do you agree with me? Chen Pingan hurriedly waved his hand and smiled. Although I can't decide on the imperial examination, I am definitely afraid to nod this head. Pulling out a book and tapping his head, Chen Pingan said, if I really want to be included in the imperial examination, I will definitely not be the only one who has a headache. It is even conceivable that the whole world of scholars scratching their heads and screaming at these arithmetic books. Yuan Tianfeng laughed. This close disciple of Wensheng's line is still very funny. Deputy Ma Jian sighed, okay outsiders, you can talk and laugh here. Chen Pingan left, and his body disappeared in a flash. Yuan Tianfeng smiled and said, don't ask when to return the book. Deputy Ma Jian smiled and didn't say anything. Chen Pingan appeared in the alley and found that Lu Lao was not there, so he chatted with Zhao Duanming for a few words, only to realize that Master Lu had stopped an old master before. On the side of Longyao in the small town, a middle-aged monk chanted silently like a spring breeze. In the wild world, several sword repairmen who traveled together, the man in the middle wearing a lotus crown said, go to Tuyua Mountain. For example, the Verdant City is the land of Taoism of the Great Master, and the Nanhua City is a 3-square-meter land of Lu Xin. Qi Tingji echoed, I have no opinion. Since they are all half of their own family, then Lu Ji doesn't need to return the sword box. Ningyao nodded and said, it's a good thing. Lu Xin categorically cut the railway line. Mr. Lu is willing to condescend to be the guest of South China City, and he is welcomed by the poor, but his brothers clearly settle the accounts. It is not difficult to borrow some of them. This joint trip has passed more than 100 dynasties, sects, and immortal forces in the wild world, but Chen Pingan's performance is only 2 words, restraint. Most of them looked down and took Ningyao and the others in a glance without stopping. With a heart, the ancient well does not wave. Chen Pingan said, on the penultimate page of the Book of Pills, the 3-mountain talisman is recorded, but according to the book's records, in addition to the number of uses, this talisman seems to have a crucial limitation, and Master Lu can solve it. Law. Lu Qin smiled and said, it's not difficult to decipher, it's a bit costly, of course, you have to use a Baiyujing secret method as an extradition. Back then, the brothers preached for all Taoist officials in the Jade Emperor City, and Mr. Sanshan Jiuho hid it. After listening to it for 3 days and 2 nights, I was seen by my brother, and I consulted Mr. Sanshan Jiuho about some talismanic knowledge. At that time, the poor Tao was watching the excitement. Later, the senior brother created the Sanshan talisman. It's all in the eyes. This symbol is based on the technique of visualization to create 3 fairy crossings that resemble a mountain city, just like opening 3 doors between heaven and earth, located on the bank of the long river of time, forming a pattern of interdependence between mountains and waters. But according to the commentary of True Relics, the monks need to have walked through the 3 mountains by themselves. Otherwise, this 3-mountain talisman is too unreasonable. It will be a life-saving talisman that any upper 5-level cultivator dreams of. Of course, it can also be used to kill people and make money. Chen Pingan gave Lu Ji and Qi Tingji a general explanation of the use of the Sanshan talisman. In addition to being the most suitable for traveling far away, this talisman has a greater magical effect, but it is also a kind of nourishing soul. Holding a talisman to travel far away, the only requirement is to train a Qimon or a pure martial artist, and must withstand the rush of time. 3 times are the best. Once you abuse this talisman, it will attract the invisible victory of the world's mountain luck. Then, if you go out in the future, it is best to go around the mountain, otherwise once you get close to the mountain, there will be inexplicable disasters. In the end, Lu Chen really took out all his belongings, and found out more than 20 green urns. In addition, he also took out a book of Huang Tingjing lingering in purple and yellow. Lu Chen finally got up and pinched at the Lotus Dojo. Dao Ju, after reading some words, carefully tore off a few pages of the book as talisman paper, but the person who really started to draw the talisman still borrowed Chen Pingan, who is a Taoist. Lu Chen now only has his thoughts left. Lu Chen tentatively said, "Because none of us have ever walked through the 6 hills personally, so I need to separate my mind, enter your heart lake for a moment, and perform a Baiyujing secret evangelism method to help transform the false and the true, and use the false and the true." Lu Chen paused for a moment, and asked with a smile, "Have you ever trusted the poor way? Of course, you can cut out a site with Jinshin in advance as a place for hospitality. Besides, the real guest is actually Chen Pingan. Attach to the tail and go." As a result, all 3 of Ningyao looked at Chen Pingan. Chen Pingan nodded, and the matter was settled. It was clear that none of the 3 of them believed in Lu Chen, but Chen Pingan's decision simultaneously understands. Chen Pingan instantly mastered the Baiyujing immortal art, and at the same time he split his mind to go to the heart lake of the 3 people in Ningyao to help shape the outline of the 6 mountain cities. The 3 people's hearts are full of swords and spirits, leaving only one place to keep the rest of the scene tightly isolated. Lu Chen is very disciplined, but just a glimpse of it makes him slap his tongue, especially Na Ningyao, with a little deduction. Knowing that her mind-to-heart world is a whole colorful world. After leaving Sangsanhu, Chen Pingan reminded, "In each mountain city, you can stay at most for 1 stick of incense. This matter must be paid attention to and cannot be taken lightly." Then Chen Pingan smiled and asked, "Are there any taboos about respecting incense?" As the old saying goes, it's easy to ask the gods to send them to the gods. The Sanshan talisman needs to return gifts and send the holy. Qi Tingji smiled and said, "I have long admired Mr. Sanshan Joho, there is nothing to taboo." Lu Ji said, "What's the matter here? Just burn a few incense sticks. Does not spend her money anyway." Lu Shen muttered, "Mr. Sanshan Joho, no matter how good you are, you will have fun." Chen Pingan, Ningyao, Qi Tingji, Lu Ji, burn incense to pay respect to the same person at the same time. Lu Shen asked, "Is there any mountain incense?" He is really scared of this hidden official at the moment. It is a pitfall to pit people. Fortunately, Chen Pingan smiled and twisted out a bamboo incense tube from his sleeve. He still took a few Pei Qian to visit the Hebo temple, and the temple gave gifts. A handful of mountain incense was distributed to the 3 of Ningyao, but when he handed it to Lu Ji, he smiled and said, "According to the rules, please ask for the money, you have to pay it yourself." Qi Tingji threw Chen Pingan and Lu Ji each with a grain of rain money. Lu Ji flicked his finger, and the grain of rain money fell into Chen Pin's sleeve. Chen Pingan took the lead in traveling far away with Fu. In the first mountain city, he twisted out 3 sticks of incense and lit the incense. Because he was left-handed, he held the incense in his right hand and held it in his left hand and held it high above his head. Lu Shen tooted, "It's very sincere to let you give up this little trick." After finishing the incense, Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Since you are sincere, you still have to believe. Ning and Yao were slower than Chen Pingan, and Chen Pingan stood there and waited for a while. Chen Pingan asked, I heard that the city master Gua from the Baiyu Jingyu hub created a big amulet called Shijin. Since the relationship between Master Lu and Qingzhu Gua is so good, they have opened Guangqianjian Zhai there, presumably. Lu Shen said bitterly, such a large talisman, one of a handful, is not comparable to a talisman paper like King Gulf. Guijia, the lord of Yushu City, and Xiao Xiang, the deputy lord, are all well-deserved Taoist old swordsmen. In the words of Dao Chang, son of the great Xuan de Guan, there are two people in Baiyujing who understand swordsmanship. Of course, Yudo counts one, and Guijia plus Xiao Xiang counts one. Jade Hub has a sword-washing thing, and it is an ancient star with a great history. The sword-washing talisman is a big talisman that evolved during the process of tempering the flying sword. Lu Shen asked tentatively, still borrowed, right? Sure enough, if you talk too much, you will lose. I would not mention Guangqianjianzhai if I knew it. Chen Pingan said, don't be nervous, let's buy them. If there are a few cards on Master Lu, we will buy a few. Lu Shen heaved a sigh of relief, only 3. In the end, Qi Tingji spent money to buy 3 Yushu City washing sword talisman, and all of them were given to Lu Ji, so that she could hurry up refining and fortify the flying sword and baited Jianfeng. Lu Ji wanted to be polite with others. He held his mind and said to Chen Pingan, thank you. A sword box, 3 mountain charms, and sword washing charms. You have to add the Ascended Realm Great Demon who crossed the sea to hunt down that alias border. If it was not necessary to join forces with Chen Chunan at that time, once Lu Ji fought his life and sacrificed his flying sword and Beidou, he might be able to engrave on the city. Chen Pingan smiled and shook his head. Lu Shenqin feels sad, your kid is generous. I remember the boy in Mud Bottle Alley before. Not like that, it's more simple. Chen Ping An's figure dissipated and went to the next mountain city, and after burning incense to pay homage, this time without waiting for the 3 of Ning and Yao, he went straight to the 3rd mountain city. Lu Shen asked, why don't you visualize the Tuoyue mountain for the last 3 mountain talisman? Chen Pingan said, even if it is already a boat that is not tied to it, you need to be careful to sail the boat for 10,000 years. Lu Shen agreed, it makes sense, and it is a good sign. The 3rd head teacher of Baiyujing suddenly smiled and said, Chen Pingan, don't forget, any unintentional remarks you have at the moment are very important. Chen Pingan ignored him, just looking at the foreground. This mountain city is a hill with a stalemate, with bones and corpses piled up, black clouds are rolling, and the mountains are full of bones. The world seems to be only black and white. This sect in the wild world, at the gate of the mountain, learn from the awe-inspiring fairy mansion, an archway building stands with the plaque, White Flower City. The doorkeeper was 2 corpses, who were supposed to be sword repairers, and their deaths were miserable. One of them was pierced through the heart orifice by a long sword and firmly nailed to the stone pillar of the archway. A person knelt on the ground, leaned forward, leaned his sword on the ground, the hilt of the sword passed through the chin and penetrated the head. Are 2 ancestors of the Great Wall of Jinqi. Chen Pingyan walked to a corpse, squatted down, pulled out the rusty long sword, put it in his sleeve, raised his palm, and swiped it gently on the side of his head. A corpse suddenly dispersed like smoke and dust, and Chen Pingan took out an empty hip flask and put it in it. Then got up and walked to the other kneeling corpse. He lifted the ancestor to his body as if to help it, and then gave it a slight shock, and put it in another empty hip flask, and then took the sword into the sleeve. The sword repair of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and there are very few people who do not like to drink. After doing all these things, Chen Pingan moved his sleeves with both hands. A fairy cultivator of the monster race arrived in the wind, and fell on the steps of the mountain gate. His face was uncertain. Who is here? leave your real name. Almost at the same time, a sect, more than 100 monks of the monster race appeared one after another, flocking to the mountain gate. Chen Pingan said indifferently, "The Great Wall of Sword Chi, the hidden official Chen Pingan." The fairyland was stunned at first, and then burst into laughter. The laughter was like thunder, and the bones fell in the mountains like clouds. "Where is the lunatic? What are you kidding?" A consecrated monk reminded him in his heart, "Sect master, this kid really looks like that hermit." It was just that soon a monk laughed and said, "Could it be the hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Chi, who couldn't get along in the Howran world, and ended up becoming a Taoist priest?" As a result, behind the sword-backed man wearing a Taoist crown, 3 more people appeared almost simultaneously. A handsome young man smiled and said, "What did you talk about? So funny." Chen Pingan joked, "I said I knew old sword immortal Chi from the Great Wall of Sword Chi. This guy killed him and didn't believe me." The native sword repairs of the Great Wall of Sword Chi are no strangers to the Yayan Mandarin of the wild world. Almost everyone knows several kinds. Especially the sword repairer who needed to travel long distances frequently like Cho Miao. Chi Tingji nodded and said, "Then beat it to death and see if you believe it or not." Chi Tingji has only one natal flying sword, named Bingjie. When he was young, he used to have a nickname, and let him go. Like to help soldiers on the road. Chi Tingji, Lu Ji, Ning Yao. The sect master of the fairyland didn't say a word, he ran away first, and then there was a noisy bird and beast dispersal. Lu Ji narrowed his eyes and said, "I'll leave after I've enjoyed it here. I promise I won't use half incense." Chi Tingji said, "I am targeting those fish that slip through the net." Chen Pingan nodded, "As long as you are within a half-scented incense, you won't delay business." After using the Sanshan talisman, this trip went to Tuyu Mountain, which greatly reduced the distance and saved a lot of time. Chen Pingan left first, and Ning Yao followed. The next mountain city is adjacent to the ruins of an ancient battlefield. This place is dark all year round, with overbearing ghosts and gatherings of ghosts and demons. There are hundreds of thousands of Yin soldiers. Ghost Valley similar to the Bone Beach of Luzhou in Beiju. It's just that there is no suppression by the Phi Ma sect. There are ruins of battlefields in the world, the suppression of Confucian academies, the land and water dojos set up by the vassal states of the major dynasties, and the experience of descending the mountain and the accumulation of merits by the genealogists, so there is very little climate. The wild world is not the case. Ning Yao said that he would play a sword here. Chen Pingan continued to travel to the next mountain city with the Fu. Any Ascension Realm swordsman who has no worries, once completely let go of his hands and feet to perform swordsmanship, the killing power can only be described in 4 words, which is unreasonable. Sure enough, within less than half of the incense, a wild sect completely broke the incense. Lu Ji stopped at the top of the mountain with a sword, calling his name directly, Chi Tingji. "I hope that the Dragon Elephant Sword sect and Luopa Mountain will be able to help each other in the future, otherwise one day there will be a dispute between the 2 sides. I might help outsiders." Lu Shen wondered, "What are you doing here?" Chen Pingan looked up, "Just come here to take a look." Returning his gaze, Chen Pingan said, "I intend to give the authentic alchemy book to the Huangting Mountain of Taiping Mountain." Lu Qin knew from a single point, the material of the book itself is good. With more than 1,200 words, it is all refined. It can indeed support a Luo Tian Dajiao and use it as a mountain guard. It is just a gift from the seniors. What are you telling me about this? Besides, you don't lack this thing in the Luopa Mountain. What about the next sect? Taiping Mountain will definitely rebuild the sect in Tonggishao. After all, this book was given to me by Brotherly, so you turn around and say hello to me. If it is feasible, I will do it. Tongji's Hao Taiping Mountain's Taoist incense belongs to the family of Baiyujing de Zhangjiao. Oh, it really hasn't changed at all. He's still a good fortune boy. Okay, it's a small matter, it's on my body. In fact, with the temper of a big brother, you don't need to ask this. Chen Pingan's eyebrows were soft. Even if you are a close person, you still have to have the etiquette you should have. Lu Xun laughed. The big brother is still great, no matter where he goes, he is so popular. Lu Xun couldn't help but sighed. There is no place in life, but my hometown is nowhere. Everything in the world has its own belongings. We are all just pawnshop buddies. Chen Pingan said, let's go. The next mountain city is the Xianjia ferry crossing in the land of the great dynasty Jiangyi. Chen Pingan's outfit is not too eye-catching. Chen Pingan said, come here to borrow a sword. The formation of the Taiping Mountain sword formation has been there for a long time, but there has been a lack of suitable long swords. Otherwise, based on Cui Dongshan's estimation, take a trip to the Hate Sword Mountain in Luzhou, Beiju, and purchase a complete set of sword imitations of acceptable rank. The sword requires about 800 grains of rain money. And the premise is that Hing Jianshan is willing to dig out half of the family, and he must come up with so many imitation swords. And the capital formation of this dynasty is a sword formation that completely abandons defense and only takes attack. Lu Xun was relieved and lent the sword box to Lu Ji, lending the dragon elephant sword sept. There is still some possibility of getting it back. Lending to Luopa Mountain is not what meat buns and dogs are. Lu Xun smiled and said, borrow. Otherwise. Chen Pingan was puzzled. You didn't talk about it before. It's not difficult to borrow if you borrow or repay. They only need to go to Luopa Mountain to ask for it in the future, and I will definitely return it. Lu Xun asked, do you do it now? Chen Pingan lost consciousness for a moment with both hands sleeved. The gatekeeper, Xing Dafeng. First, she guarded the gate of the town, and then guarded the gate of Luopa Mountain. At that time, Nen Yen was on the side of Ni Ping Alley, and he used to learn now, and personally performed the wall penetration technique. From Song Jisen's house to Chen Pingan's ancestral home. The heaven and the earth are connected, the mountain walls are connected, soft as an apricot blossom, and thin as a page. I point a sword, open the door quickly, and follow the law of Mr. Sanshan Zhouhou. It's just that even the Queen Nanpin, or the later Empress Mother, Lu Jiang, had never heard of the names of Sanshan and Zhouhou, let alone know the routes of the Great Road. It is a pity that Nanzan failed to find out the truth after returning to the capital, so that for so many years, she has not paid attention to this matter. If this talisman falls into the hands of people who know the goods, it will be Jinshan on the page alone. Treasure. Yu Xian sighed with emotion, a man and a god, riding across the galaxy and riding the sun and the moon, swimming beyond the 3 mountains, for seas and 5 mountains, life and death remain the same. The young man shook his head and said, 10,000 years ago, the gods were still the masters of this world. It's easy to cross the galaxy, and you don't need to ride the sun and the moon. Yu Xian turned his head and looked into the distance. That guy, are you staring at the two of us now? The young man did not follow Fu Lu Yuxuan's sight. Instead, he looked at the mountains and rivers of the wild world and said, it seems that he is not only planning to move mountains. A golden arch bridge. Even if a monk at the top of the ascending realm stands in it, there is no end in sight. Climately climb to the sky, of course, occupy the main position of the ancient Tianting ruins. Vulcan returned to his position, and his status was side by side. There was no difference between the two sides, and they were equal. Liz Hen, the new armored person. In the early years, the 3 sword repairmen who slashed Tuashin with their swords, Chen Qingda's natal flying sword, Duckweed, was completely broken in Tuashin, and then the Great Wall of Hadao Jinchi was born. Long Jun's natal flying sword is named Daxu Xianzhong. As for the predecessor of Lishen, Jian Xiu observes his life, flying sword, and is named Time Changhe. Newly promoted water god Rain 4, the master of the throne of the demon Fei Fei. Waterly Lu was stripped of the Tao deity by Wan Xiu, she threw it to Yuxi casually. When he reached the sky, Xiaomi carried several blessed places with him. As for the cave sky in the wild world, it is meaningless here and will only be a burden. Those beings in the blessed land are not only the source of incense in the world, but also the source of candidates for many gods. The original sword repair was brilliant, but in fact, it was the best candidate to replace the sword bearer, which was the best candidate to replace the sword bearer. The priesthood was lower than the 5th highest of the ancient heavenly court, but higher than the 12th highest. After all, the sword bearer is still alive. But the piece of Tai Bai immortal sword presented by Bai also selected Chen Pingan, Lu Kai, Xiao Yu, and the last one who was obviously a demon monk. Is simply an unreasonable hand that Beta Shengjing Juzhong can't play. Will definitely not be the arrangement of the Zhongtu Confucian Temple. This is Howren's invisible suppression of Jiaxing. Zhou had no choice but to retreat, leaving Firen in the wild world and becoming the co-master of the world in one fell swoop. Not brilliant, so I had to choose beach. In addition, the dozens of sword repairmen who were brought here by Zhou were all Tuashan 100 sword immortals. They were also the reincarnations of the gods that Tuashan planned for 2,000 years. They were similar to Yuxi and Tan Tan, although they were all occupied. There are different degrees of divine insufficiency in a seat of God, but these are just trivial matters, and they are all within careful calculations, with very small errors. The biggest surprise was that Zhou discovered that his pure divinity was indeed not lacking, even 10% higher than expected. The crux of the problem is that Zhou only got nearly half of that one. The problem is this. The species is nearly half, infinitely close, but this difference is a world of difference. And even if Zhou used his backhand, but that one would rise with the tide, making Zhou still unable to pass halfway. Even if the current Zhou is already most of the realm of the celestial co-masters of the past years, it still has not been able to piece together a complete one. Makes him have to delay his return to the world. Therefore, the existence with the most complete divinity at the moment becomes the fire who is on the throne. The ancestors of the three teachings must continue to unite. After half of the time, the three worlds will be Taoized, and the speed of Taoization will become faster and faster. Either it is. I can only go out. In addition, many relatively young mountain monks nowadays do not know a secret matter. The first ancestor of the military family had a 10,000-year agreement with the ancestor of the Sanjiao. Before returning to the world, Zhou did not know why, allowing a small group of newly promoted high-ranking gods to retain part of their humanity. For example, Liz Hen, and the three old friends of the Jiaxin account, Yuxi and Tan. In that battle that swept the two worlds, if a high-ranking fell on the battlefield, it would be a return home from a long distance wandering for thousands of years. It was a kind of return, but it would lose varying degrees of pure divinity. The vastness of the old heaven is beyond the imagination of any mountain monk. Any high ranking is like a territory that occupies several worlds, but compared to his hometown, it looks deadly silent. I only talked about the distance between the four heavenly gates. It is possible that any cultivator of the Jade Purity realm can only swim from one gate to another in his entire life. In the narrow sense, the old Tianting site is like a capital of the human dynasty. Liz Hen, Yuxi, and Beach. Today the three people met at one end of the Golden Arch Bridge and walked slowly. Unanimously, each exhibited a blindfold, more like people. Relying on the retained humanity to be an individual, that kind of weird feeling, is probably a veritable involuntary. Once immortal, like the word freedom, becomes one of the most meaningless words. Tan murmured, while I can still feel regret. Yes, four expressions are indifferent. It's not easy to pretend to be an individual. From now on, you can easily manifest a new world, and then separate a bit of divinity. That self is definitely more free than before, and you can make mistakes. Tan was full of anger, gritted his teeth and said, that self, or is it still himself? This one is not still looking at that one coldly. Is it silly to overlook 100 years, 1,000 years, or 10,000 years? What's the matter? Significance. When divinity completely covers human nature, there is no more joy, anger, sorrow, and joy. For these gods, they seem to have countless freedoms and countless possibilities, but the only unfreedom is not allowing themselves to be gods and not allowing themselves to destroy themselves. Li Zhen seemed to be the most indifferent one. He hugged the back of his head with his hands and smiled and said, I really missed the years in the Great Wall of Jinchi. I have already copied it all the way down anyway, and I can often chat with Master Hermit. Li Zhen continued, according to what Qin Qingdu and Long Jun said in their early years, if you become one of the 5 highest in the name, it seems that you can break the shackles a bit, and you don't need to be as boring as we are now. Tan's eyes lit up. Suddenly, the heavens and the earth brightened up, and a woman without the slightest emotion rang out abruptly, just a few of you trash. Shui Xinyu almost suffocated in an instant. Humanity was squeezed to the size of a dust, and he had to show a pair of golden eyes. His golden body was as big as a star. Tan is also in a similar situation, but the avenue's suppression is not as exaggerated as you see is now enduring. The distance is relatively better, and it can keep the body as it is. Li Zhen's hippie smiled and said, see you, this is a once-in-lifetime opportunity to provoke a few words to our girl, Wan, and maybe be beaten to death. At any rate, she can get a moment of relief, and then she will be put together again by Zhoumi God, known as the Sleepless. Careful intentionally or unintentionally let them maintain a little humanity, just like a sleepy person in the world, but they have become insomniacs. But as long as all the residual humanity is wiped out and the divine nature is eaten up completely, naturally there will be no such pain. The so-called gods are like a chessboard, and every square has an emotion. Lift accurately, put back accurately. The higher the position, the bigger the chessboard, the more squares. The problem is that every single or multiple emotional ups and downs, overlaps, and blends are not aimless and unable to do whatever one wants, because they are orderly and always have a clear purpose. Moreover, the total number of black and white pawns is always in an absolute position of half and half. If we say that human nature is a natural prison given to the human race by the gods, such absolute and pure freedom is a bigger cage. And this is just the view of the human race. The gods do not know it, or to be precise, the gods will never know it. Finally, whether it is a human or a god, freedom seems to be a cage. A person who is not a sage can have no fault, knowing wrong can improve the great yen. Will make mistakes, but can also correct them, which is a kind of freedom. There is no better word that can comfort people's hearts more than this. A woman who no longer has a ponytail stands on the railing in the center of the Golden Arch Bridge. With a wave of her hand, she dragged the towering golden water Yusi into a round of sun, and killed it with fire. A 14th level cultivator Yusi, facing her existence, there was no way to fight back. Zhoumi appeared here, but did not stop her wanton action anyway. The divinity of the water is still here, there is no trace of omission, he will have a big deal to put it together again. Looking down on the railing carefully, overlooking several worlds, smiled and said, who would have thought that I would miss that one, just a few steps away from the city. Unfortunately, I couldn't become that one. Nowadays, many places can't be touched by careful sight. But she who is standing on the railing has no restrictions on this road, because all the sunlight can reach is the territory under her jurisdiction. She never said a word. A pair of golden eyes, long golden hair, and a golden robe. Xiaomi knew that after reaching the sky, she looked all over the world, but did not look at that person alone. It was the relic of the immortal sect master. His name was Qin Tong. He was a half-celestial soldier. He needed to spend some money to repair it. Lu Zhi's sword was too ruthless. This green pupil robe should be recorded in the Summer Palace, because the cultivators of Baihua City have often visited the battlefield of the Great Wall of Jinqi in history. The immortal realm, the lord of a sect, slipped the fastest today. Qi Tingji still blocked his way, and forced his union on the road, but the opponent used a natural escape method, but the ancient was cut. Can he stay? It's hard to say the next Yupu stage. In addition, there are several demon pills of the demon clan, one in the Jade Pu realm, and several earth immortals, all of which were stripped from the corpses by Qi Tingji. Palms were empty, and slowly rotated. Qi Tingji was supposed to enjoy the scenery. For any Jian Xiao who can be called a sword fairy in the Great Wall of Jinqi, who is not a character who walked out of the Sea of Shirshan, how many are normal people? Lu Zhi glanced at the demon pills with a sad expression. I remember that in the early years, there was a female sword repairer who recorded military exploits. She was not good at fighting in the Golden Core realm. She didn't know her name, but she only knew that she was a gentlewoman with a good appearance, but she didn't know her. Why, I have never been married, and my appearance is not as good as Zhou Cheng's last year. Of course, she must be much more beautiful than Lu Zhi. This woman, whose name Lu Zhi doesn't even know, would be responsible for recording, investigating, and documenting military exploits with others every time after the war. When she saw those female sword repairers who had left the battlefield, she would laugh, good-looking. Lu Zhi even had a very vague memory of the woman's face, but her smiling face seemed to be unforgettable even if she wanted to deliberately forget it. A golden core female sword repairer, and not good at fighting, but in the end she chose to rush to the battlefield. Between death and alive, she did not choose the latter. She followed Fei Xingcheng to a foreign land, but went to the city with Yu Jin. Head, probably because she feels that since the Great Wall of Sword Qi is destined to be unstoppable, and there is no hometown in the world, she doesn't need her to record the exploits. Not a big thing, not a big woman. Lu Zhi has never been so hard to let go of his friend Zhou Cheng's departure. It is simply a baffling thing. But it seemed that until this moment, when Lu Zhi remembered this woman whose sword aura was extraordinary, and when she thought that she was gone, Lu Zhi realized that the Great Wall of Sword aura really disappeared. Lu Zhi was a little irritable, looking around with a cold face. There was no monster to kill. Damn, it would be nice if he could chop it again from the beginning. It was ecstatic in its heart, and immediately replied, I have never been there, you can swear to the sky. I have never been an enemy of Jian Xiao, the journey is far away, the realm is low, how dare to go to the Great Wall of Jinqi to find its own way. Qi Tingji nodded, then get a good baby in the next life and see the scenery over there. With a wave of his sleeves, his soul was wiped out. Nowadays, many monks on the top of the mountain in Haoran may all know the existence of the Yinjian immortal spectrum, but before the Yinjiangxian imprint, the Great Wall of Sword Qi was actually the first edition of the crudely carved 100-sword immortal spectrum. Qi Tingji had read it in his spare time, but he was not interested in buying those seals secretly. In the eyes of the old sword fairy, the hermit's knife skills were really scribbled, and he had not yet really entered the room. He was among the gold and stone members, but there was a side note on the seal. The printed text makes Qi Tingji feel pretty good. There is no resort in the shape of mountains and rivers, but it is the highest city on earth. Lu Zhi said, you made a lot of money this time. The group of them showed up at the gate here, and things were rushed, so that the fairy clan had no time to go to the treasury first. They said it was a man who made money and died for food. But when life is hanging by a thread, there is still nothing to do. Hesitating, the cultivator, whether it is a genealogist or a mountain cultivator, understands this simple truth. A on the mountain who died in a pile of money is the most embarrassed. It's really a lot of mess together. It's not too much to say that you have made a lot of money. After all, it is the foundation of the sect. Even if you open up the 3 sword-washing talismans, you are still very profitable. Qi Tingji smiled and said, the gamblers at the Great Wall of Sword Qi said earlier that they would go to the bank with a hidden official. It is hard to lose money, and you can make money lying down. Lu Ji reminded, Chen Pingan is a careful accounting manager. Qi Tingji nodded and said, let's look back and count the harvests of Baihua City in the lower reaches of Li Baihua City, let the hidden officials account for 40%. Unexpectedly, Lu Ji said, 40%. He didn't contribute much. It's interesting to divide his achievements into 2. Qi Tingji said with satisfaction, finally, it looks like a chief worshipper. Lu Ji said, the robe is not bad, it's mine. I can give it to Wu Manyan, the little girl. Qi Tingji took out the green pupil robe from his sleeve and threw it to Lu Ji. Lu Ji took the hand, shook his robe lightly, and said in surprise, sitting on the ground and sharing the spoils is like an addiction. Qi Tingji nodded and said, I just found out. Lu Ji curled his lips. Before at the Great Wall of Jinqi, Jian Xiu didn't have this habit. Is it a stinking problem for hermits? Anyway, the name of the country does not change, and whoever sits on the dragon chair is not particular about it here. In the wild world, any dynasty under the mountain with a country of more than 1,000 years is definitely more difficult to provoke than the mountain sect of the same age. The capital of this dynasty is no different from the Patriarch Hall on the mountain. But at this moment, in one of the highest buildings of the palace, in the corridor under the eaves of the top floor, there was a stranger who entered without authorization. The man in the green shady robes, clenched fists with one hand, and with the other hand, is like walking in his courtyard. At this moment, I stopped and looked up. A string of bells hung under the eaves. Inside each bell, there were 2 tiny daggers with very small spacing. When a slight breeze blew, they knocked. According to the records of the Summer Palace, the emperor and the city missed the battle due to many years of retreat and gave Tuashin a large sum of money. Moreover, the relationship between the Yunwen dynasty and the 2 big monsters of the old throne, Huang Wuan and the Lord of the Lotus Nunnery is not bad, otherwise, with a fairyland, the Yunwen dynasty really cannot be guaranteed. Fortunately, even if Huang Wuan and the Lord of the Lotus Nunnery are dead, it seems that the emperor just broke through and became a newly promoted Ascended Realm Great Monk. A burly man wearing a dragon robe appeared in the corridor out of thin air, and said solemnly, the distinguished guests are here, and there are misses to greet them. It's just that the Taoists don't say hello. I am also ready to prepare a banquet to meet the Taoists. Wash the dust. There is a slender woman next to him, with gold powder on her cheeks and a waist knife. She is actually a real martial artist from the 10 realms. Her eyebrows are naturally connected, and her ears are extremely long and thin, which is the so-called face of heaven and human in ancient books. Chen Pingan smiled and said, you don't have to think about how to treat guests. It's not a hassle at all. Just lend me that set of sword formations. The emperor of the Moor dynasty, alias Yi Bao, has 2 Dao names. He used to be Po. After reaching the Ascendant Realm, he took himself a more domineering one, calling himself Unique. As for the female martial artist next to Yi Bao, named Bai Ren, she is an extremely famous female martial artist. Now she is more than 100 years old and has a skillful appearance. She has reached the end in her 50s. The Jade City has opened a defensive formation of the capital, imitating the Glaze realm. The capital is like falling into a stagnant stream of time, and it is full of colorful colors. All the monks in the city have chosen to stay in place and dare not act rashly. Once the cultivators of the upper 5 realms are not easy to walk, this is the current sign of the enemy, who dares to make a mistake. In the wild 3 rounds of the moon, 2 of them once had their masters, the owner of the Lotus Nunnery who has died and disappeared, and the Credit Month who now raises a group of ducks by the Longshu River. Only 1 round, 10,000 years it has always been a land without a master. The great monks on the top of the barren world can travel freely with their ability, but Tuiwa Mountain is not allowed to build a place of cultivation. Lu Qin stretched his hand to the white jade plate in the middle and asked, "Why not try this moon?" Chen Pingon shook his head, "There is no certainty." Lu Qin deduced it and said, "I'm still 30% sure." Chen Pingon smiled and said, "It doesn't mean that you are not sure." Criminal Officer Hao Su, after Chen Pingon decided to change his route, he quietly flying up by himself with a Lu Qin talisman. In the end, Hao Su will stay there to meet Qi Tingji and Lu Ji. Poetry, if you want to be 1,000 miles away, go to the next level. Xian Family Affairs, want to see the world, in the moon. Chen Pingan's plan was to leave the wild world with only 1 round of months left. Chen Pingan clapped his hands, stood up slowly, took out a pot of wine, the Qingshanshan wine from his own wine shop, and took a sip of the wine. Chen Pingan raised the back of his hand, wiped the corner of his mouth, and asked, 3 souls and 7 souls, it seems that the 7 souls are not very knowledgeable, but I saw at the Confucian temple that the 3 souls were the first to say that the 3 souls had a heaven and earth. Lu Qin stopped practicing boxing, sat cross-legged, folded his hands on his abdomen, and said, "The place where the 3 souls go is the place where the most inquiries are made. The place where the heavenly souls go is the sky prison. Isn't there a saying, called the soul flying outside the sky? How did you get here, don't you know now? And the place where the soul goes, pays attention to a reincarnation of cause and effect, so it belongs to places like the capital of the underworld. As for some lonely ghosts who still linger in the sun after death, they are actually human souls. 7 souls follow this soul alone. The people's so-called soul flies away, this is how it is said. With our surnames, the real name of the monster race, there is a big way in the world. What souls in the people below the mountain are not holding back, and the air is hanging. The sayings that have been passed down from generation to generation have actually broken the secrets of things such as exhaustion, but they are only slightly vague." Chen Pingan nodded. Lu Qin asked with a smile, "You let Hao Su go to the middle of the moon, as if he didn't even ask why." Chen Pingan answered the wrong question. "For example, there is a truth, I have talked about it for 10,000 years, and replaced it with you, believe it or not. This principle is very simple. I am a sword repairman of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. This concealed Taoist friend in front of him must have displayed a blindfold. What kind of Taoist attire, what sword-like Great Wall hidden official face, only a few years after Chen Pingan returned to Howran. Step back 10,000 steps and say, even if there is a good thing about falling from the sky, you can fall into the 3 realms once you fall. Any jade realm in the world, who can hold this great gift? Back then, Tuashan's Lijun couldn't catch it, even today's Taoist closed disciple, Shan Qing couldn't catch it. So as long as the other party is still willing to conceal his identity, it is probably not an unsolvable feud, there is still room for maneuver. Chen Pingan glanced north, retracted his gaze, and asked Lu Qin in his heart, the law can only be so high. Is Zhang Jiaolu hiding himself? It is said that on the top floor of Xiandan City, if a monk leans on a railing and looks into the distance, as long as he has enough eyesight, he is destined to not see the top of Tuiwa Mountain or the head of the Great Wall of Jinchi. Therefore, there is a proud statement circulating in Xiandan City, Howran has a cloud in his poems, and dare not speak loudly, for fear of shocking the heavens. But here we have to change the way of thinking, because people did not dare to whisper that day, lest they be heard by the monks in our city. Lu Qin smiled and said, "A big man, private money, after all, it is a little bit." At the moment, the Taoist Dharma, the foundation of the Tao, is the 5,000 characters handed down by the Taoist ancestors, so it is as high as 5,000 feet, not high or low. Well, as the third head teacher of Bai Yujing, Lu Qin has been a little disciple of the Taoist ancestor for thousands of years, and of course he will have his own Taoism. If it weren't for Lu Qin's advocacy and insisted on accepting apprentices on his behalf, then Lu Qin, the third disciple, would naturally become a veritable Taoist Guanmen disciple after a few more years. But for some reason, it seems that Lu Qin deliberately avoided the matter and abandoned the title himself. Lu Qin asked with a smile, "It's actually very simple to want to be higher. Have you not turned a page of my 3 books until now? It's all right, just take this opportunity to browse." If Qin Pingan hasn't read the South China Sutra yet, it would be simple. Today's Qin Pingan, as long as he is willing to delve into the Taoist book and spread it out. It is like a divine help with a kind heart. After reading it again, you will get its true meaning. Everything will come to pass, because Qin Pingan is now in a position where the mysterious and mysterious Sergeant hears the Tao, and he is a veritable, satisfied person. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Compared with Taoist ancestors who have only 5,000 essays, your 380,000 words, is the number of words a bit too much? Knowing and leisurely, talking about Zhanzhan, but you say it yourself of." It was just one of the pioneers of that ancient battle. Unfortunately, he fell on his way to the sky. The Tao Fa collapsed and dissipated between the heavens and the earth. Only the white jade hairpin in the hair bun was preserved intact, but was left in the world. On the earth, she was nowhere to be found, and was eventually picked up by a female cultivator with profound blessings in the barren world of later generations. She was considered to have obtained this avenue inheritance, and she was the founder of the fairy hairpin city. After entering the 5 realms of the body, the female cultivator began to build the fairy hairpin city, and at the same time establish sects, spreading branches and leaves, and finally in the hands of the 4 major monks of the city lord, making great efforts to govern and making money, and the fairy hairpin city is built higher and higher. The current city lord of Fairy Hair City is a great monk in the ascending realm. He is proficient in the 3 avenues of forging, formation, and alchemy. He has friends all over the world. He also has a deputy city lord of the Fairyland cultivation base. The Taoist name Inlu, is a direct disciple of the current city lord. He is a master of room art. He once bought a female cultivator of the Yulong sect with the Wild Army account in advance. Unfortunately, he was taken by the throne. The big demon Chiyun quickly ascends first, stripping the beauty. Otherwise, there will be hundreds of more Yulong sect female cultivators in the city of Immortal Hairpin. If a named disciple of Zion's Hanqing has cultivated for 100 years and has not been able to be among the earth immortals, he will be expelled from the land and removed from the landscape genealogy of the ancestor hall of Zion's Hanqing. What will happen after that is death or alive, depending on his ability. Dixian disciple, if within 500, the monk fails to enter the 5 realms, the fairy hairpin city will not drive people, according to the ancestral rule, no waste, empty spiritual energy, once the deadline, directly kill on the spot, all walks, landscape and luck, demon pill, skin bag, all return to Xianzhan city. Therefore, the number of direct disciples of Xiandan city has always been small, but the ancestral temple incense is not precarious, because the Jade Pu realm and the earth celestial monks in the wild world come here to serve as worship and guest, as many as those who cross the river. Christian Carp, as long as the money is enough, you can stay in the city for cultivating. The fairy hairpin city is like an acquired cave sky, full of aura and thick like water, which is extremely suitable for cultivation. In addition, the female officials carefully cultivated in Xianyan City were used to marry with the dynasty of the mountain and the sect on the mountain. The peach and flower makeup of the water-fine hairpin, the colorful robes and the water and moon shoes are even more famous in the wild world. Lu Shen certainly knew why Chen Pingan would make a special trip to Xianjiang City. If it's just that Xianyanqing has been bragging about itself, what is the highest city in the world, or the official lane with the newly promoted throne great demon, what kind of in-law relationship is it, with Chen Pingan's character? Surely it's not like that. Compete. Because the weapons forged in Xianjiang City, the robes refined in Jinsui City, and the Xianjia wine made by Jiuquan sect, are among the top 10 in the wild. The Great Wall of Sword Qi was broken by the wilds, and the fairy hairpin city, which was not found by a single monk, was reputed to be able to occupy a successful labor. Xiandan City continued to spend money to raise the city, of course, because it can make more money. Before being expelled from the city or killed in the city, any monk who was a direct descendant of Xianjiang City is a well-deserved master of casting. He is proficient in weapon casting and magic weapon refining, because the city has a first-class blessed place, an ancient star that fell to the ground, making Xiandan City sit on a resource-rich natural arsenal, which can continuously cast armors and equipment on the mountain. Every 30 years, all the major dynasties in the wild world will send envoys to buy weapons here. The cultivators of Fairy Hairpin City will be sent there, and a large sum of money from the gods will be paid in. The Great Wall of Sword Qi and Haoran have been aggressively attacked before, and a large number of foundry masters have been gathered in Fairy Hair City, and they have been sent to the major military accounts. One of the few armored weapons. The Fairyland Big Demon Inlu came to the top floor, stood with the city Lord Master, and said in his heart, "It's not like a good talker." Xian Pu's face was gloomy, and he nodded and said, "It's destined to be unkind." Inlu asked, "Master, how many punches can you hold that lunatic?" After Xianjiang City started the big formation, every time he punched the opponent, it would cost a lot of fairy money. My family's Fairy Hairpin City has a thick family background, but the fairy money is piled up into a mountain. No matter how deep the foundation is, it will eventually be punched down. The loss of that fairy money will be painful. If the fairy money is converted into heaven and earth aura, being imprisoned in the city, it's still not enough to flow out of the fields, but the total loss of 36 large formation center fairy soldiers, half fairy soldiers, and Jinshan treasures in Xianjiang City is an astronomical repair cost. The old ascendant cultivator stroked his beard and said, "Where is the boxing method? It is clearly Dao method." Even if the end of the martial arts is on the first floor, no matter how hard the fist is, it can still be harder than the force of the old ancestor who moved the mountain. Stick. In other words, if you want to break through the formation, you can only use one technique and one flying sword. At present, it seems that the problem is not big. Back then, Zhu Fei hit the city with 12 sticks. You need sticks to hit the same place. This guy in front of you is mostly out of reach. He came here to make a name for himself, and he didn't expect to break the city. Xian Pu's face was pale, and he actually changed his mind. Quick Fei Jinchuan trust Yuashan and Yiluo, and told them that there are powerful enemies coming to invade Xianjiang City, and the strength is equivalent to a throne. It turns out that the unreliable Taoist's method of punching is arrogant and unreasonable. It seems that the method of Taoism can be continuously stacked, and a punch is heavier than a punch. Old Ascension Realm thought about it a little, and added, "Old Throne." The two alchemy boys on the top floor turned into two messenger flying swords, leaving the Fairy Hairpin City in an instant, traveling thousands of miles away, faster than a great sword fairy's natal flying sword. Because they are not only true spirits refined from flying swords, but also use a superior talisman method, which is a big talisman that has a lot to do with the Baiyujing Lingbao City, with 2 lines of spiritual talisman inscribed, the meteor rushing to the moon Yulioha. As for how Xian Yanqing learned this great charm from Bai Yujing, of course it was bought with money. Xian Pu said, "Yinlu, you should immediately be responsible for the abbot's several sets of attacking big formations. In addition to delaying as much as possible, it is best to interrupt the opponent's continuous movement of punches." When the fairy Yinlu Yufeng left, he heard the once gentle and elegant master, cursed in an indignant tone, "A monk on the top of a mountain must learn how to hand a fist from a reckless man, and he has a thick skin." Xuanpi's face became more and more ugly, and the weather was uncertain. It turned out that the flying swords made by the two alchemy boys slammed and shattered without warning thousands of miles away. Two broken talismans were falling on the way to the ground, like suddenly, the two Bai Yujing little Dao children had to obey the decree obediently as if they were ordered by their ancestors. They flew all the way back to Xianzhan City, and bumped into the big sleeve of the Taoist Faxiang. The immortal Yinlu, who is the deputy city lord, can no longer care about these trivial matters, and said with a grinning smile, "Open the door to welcome guests." Thousands of long swords formed a formation, and from a mansion in Xianyan City, smashed into the head of the Taoist Faxiang. In addition, there is a long river of Fulu, which rises into the sky in clusters at the foot of the mountain, like the longest celestial rope in the world, trying to wrap one arm of the Taoist man. Yinlu snorted coldly, spreading his heartfelt message about the immortal residences throughout the city, informing all the foreign hermits who came to this cultivator, "Don't be stupid to watch the excitement, everyone, don't just stand by and watch. I believe that no one can get the least bit of a favor when the evil lion breaks the prohibition. It's just that the two long rivers of sword formation and Fulu, coupled with the shots of many chi practitioners in Xianzhan City, whether it is magical magic or attacking heavy treasures, without exception, all have failed. It seems that the Taoist Faxiang does not exist in this world. However, the Taoist can punch non-stop, falling firmly on the fairy hairpin city." The long river of swords swept past the head of the Taoist Faxiang. The long rope of the talisman was just a loose knot in the void. Immortal Hairpin City can only retreat to the second place, focusing on the formation of defenses, large and small mansions, and the archways and couplets above the main road. The brilliance flows everywhere, shining brightly, shining through the area of thousands of miles. In particular, the list of signed books are all beautiful words with the meaning of Taoism, and the merits are forever. Xiongguan in the world. Indestructible. Hai En Tianqi. Feng Shui is the most prosperous. Unique. They can all contribute to the already strong enough fairy hairpin city. The price is the true meaning of the Taoism contained in these list books, which gradually dissipates, as if to join a city. The big monks in the city also offered several talismans, palm-sized talisman papers, which were as big as a mountain in an instant, or the spirit of the talisman was like a river pouring down, and they covered the city together, as if putting on a piece of tricks for the fairy hairpin city. Robe. Obviously it is daytime, but there is a ray of bright moonlight falling on the white jade rail, carved with jade. The moonlight is like water, and the pine shadows are full of steps, like a dream and fantasy. Near the waterfall in the city, there is a wooden bridge across the mountain, and there is a man who helps the deer, followed by a pair of book girls and maids carrying a suitcase. The old monk who stopped on the bridge first waved his sleeves to disperse those chaotic waterfalls. The old man looked elegant and looked at the huge face that kept punching. He sighed. Painful, he was nothing but after traveling, I came to Xianzhan City to visit the immortals, and paid for a few scrolls. How could they be exposed to this unseen disaster in 1,000 years? The old man took out an antique picture of a sleeping ape on the mountain from his sleeve, and the scroll was thrown out. After outside the bridge, an old ape with a height of thousands of feet appeared in the painting. One stepped on the void and jumped high to meet the punch of the Buddha. As a result, the old ape with a golden line on its back was blocked by the man. A punch was instantly crushed. On the top of the waterfall, there is a towering archway with the word Long Men on the top of the waterfall. There are two masters of the world sitting against each other across the water. One of them is painting. First, I drew a few birds, charming and lovely, lifelike, fluttering wings and flying high. The mist rose above the scroll, and the aura of the landscape followed the birds and scattered together to stabilize the fairy hair city formation. Tracing the mountains and rivers, in order to charm the way. With a sound of misty birds, thousands of mountains and rivers are full of wind and smoke. This old monk, who served as a guest Qing, was named Slim May. He boasted that he had no talent in his life, and only painted the plum blossoms. Another person throws a talisman into the water, and then there is a huge pond, slowly surfaced. It is using its own weight and natural powers to help Xiandan City stabilize the roots and water transport. All sorts of strange sights and visions in the city were shaking after the punch outside the city. Even if the aura of Xiandan City is getting more and more abundant, and there are large formations from the hands of different monks, like mushrooms after the rain, layers of Taoism bless the city, but it still can't stop the punch from the punch. The violent turmoil, the vibration of Gaoqing became more and more exaggerated. Some monster monks with insufficient realm, pale and horrified, could only tremble with the gods' money on them, as long as it was not Gu Yuqian, even Xia Shuqian was included. Squeeze a smash, and use a little bit of strength, just for the fairy hair city to be able to produce more auras. The old man with the title of Thin Plum sighed, such a high level of beauty, not to mention seeing it, is unheard of. The monk who threw the talisman in the pool nodded, it's not just high. This man has no scum and morality. Upon closer inspection, he looks like a seamless pagoda of Buddhism. Wild monks, if they restore the true body of the demon race, it is largely an alternative road manifestation, similar to a kind of avenue migrating. There are pros and cons to this move. After all, hard practice is to form a personal body for the general situation. Even if you encounter a life and death battle, you must fight to the death if you have to fight to the death. The monks of the monster race will still not easily recover their true bodies, because they will wear down their Taoism and imperceptibly weaken their own Taoism. Compared with the real body of the demon race, the monks' sacrificial phenomena are relatively less restricted, but they are hollow and dense. They are of course different from a piece of tofu and a stone. And some monks specialize in work the matter of Dharma and Xiang, and use mystery to deter and frighten hostile monks who don't know the truth. Isolated from the world by the fairy hair city formation, even if it is a throned great demon standing at the pinnacle of the ascension realm, standing here with the Yin spirit out of his body, he needs to face 3 ascended realm monks at the same time. Even if the opponent is an unknown 14th realm great monk, Xianzhan City has some chance of winning. The premise is not to allow this Yin god to merge with the real body and Dharma of the Taoist outside the city. Chen Pingan had already quietly shot between the electric light and flint, and knocked over the 2 incense burners on the table together with the oil lamps, especially the golden sesame oil in the oil lamps, and slid straight into the picture. He smiled and said, "My dear, get back." The old woman screamed, and quickly returned to the picture scroll. With her big sleeves rolled, the wind was rolling, she was still unable to knock back the long golden thread. Once the golden sesame oil from the sun, even a drop of it in the place of cultivation, it will be big. The sight of the sun rising into the sky, what is there to hide? She had to be hard-hearted and throw out the whisk, so that she could not bear a drop of golden sesame oil into the picture scroll. At the same time, she stretched out her hand and grabbed the hanging statue that belonged to her. The scrolls came together in an instant, and it seemed as if a dry palm stretched out from a whirlpool, and quickly grabbed the scroll, and was finally taken to Yin Ming by her. It was even the last opportunity of immortal Hairpin City to ask the gods to come down. Up. And the old man was a bit slow in his movements, obviously not as experienced as the master. Although the golden thread was stopped, the picture scroll was stretched out and held by the green-shirt guest. Xuanpu was dumbfounded and at a loss. Chen Pingon looked at the old city lord of the fairy hairpin city. Either fight with me within the 3 sticks of incense, and when your figure dissipates, I will ask Xuanpu Jingxiang to add oil, and we will continue to relive the old days. Or you do it yourself and kill this disciple who almost deceived the ancestors. Once Xuanpu died, no one in Zion's Hanqing would know how to reduce the truth. Then the picture scroll in my hand, of course, became a worthless one. Waste paper. Chen Pingon raised the scroll in his hand and shook it gently. What do you say? The old man waved. Xuanpu was so scared that his guts were splitting. Master, don't fall into the divorce of this fellow. Master and apprentice work together. There is still a chance of winning. But the old ancestor of Xianzhan City, he didn't even bother to talk nonsense with Xuanpu, a trash disciple who had not succeeded or failed. He directly slammed a natal spell on Xuanpu, and at the same time, he slowly left the ancestor hall. The green-shirt guest at the gate asked, "Who are you?" The swordsman in Qingshan stopped, and when he turned his head to look around, he smiled. There are also a pair of pure golden eyes. The old ancestor in the patriarch hall was silent, and immediately stopped asking questions. He just killed Xuanpu quickly and solved this trouble. There are 2 masters and apprentices in the house. Relatively speaking, Xuanpu suffered too much. After all, the master had been practicing the ghost way for thousands of years. Before a stick of incense, an ancestor hall was soon torn down by the 2 masters and apprentices. The ascending realm great monk Xuanpu, the current city lord of Xianzhan City, just died in the hands of his master. Chen Pingon had nothing to do, and after confirming that Xuanpu was dead, he threw the hanging statue in his hand and went to the alchemy site on the top of the mountain. At the last glance, Chen Pingon was actually not looking at the pair of masters and disciples who turned against each other, but the founder of the fairy hairpin city with a hairpin on the top. The portrait of the woman seemed to open the sky. She glanced at the back of the blue shirt, and she sighed faintly. With a sound, it seemed as if I had met an old friend, and I didn't seem to be sure of the other party's identity, and then a picture scroll burned out on its own. Lu Chen squatted in the dojo, rubbing his chin. If the young mountain master of Luopa Mountain had picked Jingyang Mountain with his sword, he was practicing his hand for the upcoming sword to cut the mountain. So today, if you don't rush to shake Xianzhan City, how can it be like warming up for Bai Yujing in the future? Isn't South China City going to be affected by Qiyu? So Lu Chen didn't expect Chen Pingon to enter the 14th level as soon as possible. And outside the city, Chen Pingon destroyed the #1 city in the world with the spirit of beating the drums, which he learned from the awe-inspiring Wu Fu Chui Qing. The same fist moves, fists are delivered, as if the fist intent is superimposed endlessly. Thousands of miles of mountains and rivers centered on Xianzhan City, all felt the vibration of countless thunderous thunder exploding at the same time under the earth and high places in the world. One punch completely penetrated the mountain and water restrictions of Xianzhan City, and the fist of that human figure finally touched the real body of Gao Qing. With another punch, most of the arms of the Taoists Faxiang, like a mountain chisel, fell into the fairy hairpin city. The third punch directly penetrated the entire city of Xianzhan, with the entire arm traversing the city, and then swept back and forth with one arm, and the highest city in the world was beaten in 2. The upper half of the sloping and collapsing Gaoqing was held on the side by the Taoist Faxiang, and pushed out with great force. It fell to the ground hundreds of miles away, and the raised dust covered the sky. As for the remaining half of the high city, the Taoist Faxiang interlaced his hands and 10 fingers, folded his fist, lifted it high, and slammed it down quickly, hitting half of the city continuously deep into the ground. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.